Hey guys, real quick before we got started, I just wanted to say that I am sorry I haven't posted anything recently. I've been extremely busy. I'm working on a pretty big collaboration with one other YouTuber, which will be out very soon. And I've been getting a lot of other things ready for this channel, which I'll be releasing this week as well. So just want to apologize and say thank you again to all of you guys. So, I've got a friend. Just one, but he's my friend. He's my best friend, actually. These other people I have in my life aren't friends, but I'm getting way ahead of myself. My name is Liam. I met my best friend Wyatt when we were just 4 years old. We spent the next several years of our lives inseparable. For one, we became best friends almost immediately. But that wasn't the only reason we spent so much time together. My parents split up not long before I met Wyatt. I've seen my dad a couple times over the years since then, but I never really got to know him. My mom met this guy Jack about a year after my dad left. I can remember when he first came into our lives. He was so nice, and we had so much fun together. He got my mom, brother, and I all of these nice things, and brought us to do all these fun things. It was great. They were together for about a year before they ended up getting married, and that first year was amazing. But things quickly changed after that. Once Jack moved in with us, he was just different. He started drinking a lot, which at the time, I didn't really understand what that was. But what I did understand was the anger he showed my mom and I. It didn't make any sense to me why he would act that way, of course, but I was easily able to recognize when he was in one of his moods. Over the next couple years, I started spending more and more time at Wyatts House. His family seemed perfect. He was an only child with a wonderful mom and a loving dad. His dad was a chemist that researched diseases and made a very nice living for his family. Things weren't so nice at my house. We were maybe middle class at best, but that wasn't what made things less nice. It was what went on in my house. As I grew a little older, I started to think maybe something else was going on when my mom started having these random marks and bruises on her. She would randomly have a black eye and come up with some sort of an excuse on how she fell down or whatever. But I started to put things together as I grew to be a little older. By the time I was 8 years old, I stayed over at Wyatts' house anytime possible. By that point, the abuse from Jack spread over to my younger brother and I. We were terrified of Jack and hated him at that point. I would ask my mom why she didn't make Jack move out, and she would just tell me it was complicated. So we just lived like this for years. But I strengthened my friendship with Wyatt because of this. My brother sought out his own friend and basically did the same thing. Looking back, I feel guilty for leaving my mom alone with that monster so much of the time. But we were only trying to protect ourselves and avoid as much abuse as possible. We spent our summers running around the neighborhood playing. There was a huge house we passed by one day on our way home with Wyatt's parents. The house was amazing and we were intrigued. As two young boys, we assumed someone famous must have lived there. Since the house was only about a mile from Wyatt's house, we decided we were going to go check it out. We walked around for a while and got lost for a bit, but eventually we found the house. We were amazed by it at the time. Looking back, I don't think it was quite as amazing as we made it out to be in our young minds. It was definitely a big house, but that's about it. I can still remember standing there and hearing the yelling for the first time. The yelling was of young children playing. We followed the voices and saw probably 6 or 8 kids playing from behind the house in the backyard. It was at that point that we discovered the Hampton family. There were a total of 16 kids in the house, ranging from a newborn to a 15-year-old. The parents literally must have made one child after another, but at the time, we didn't think about that. We were just amazed to meet this family and played with them as much as possible for the next 3 months. One day while I was at home, I heard a crazy knocking on our front door. When I answered it, Wyatt was standing there, almost out of breath. He had just gotten home with his parents, and on his way home, he passed by the Hampton home. Apparently there had been a fire at the house. I immediately got my shoes on and we took off down the street. We ran as fast as we could to the house. When we got there, it was taped off and there were tons of people standing around it in addition to the firefighters and police. At the time, it was just some crazy and exciting thing that happened. But later, we found out what really happened. A couple days later, I was over at Wyatts. I can remember us talking to his parents. "So where are all the Hampton kids going to live?" we asked. His dad replied by giving us the best answer he could at the time. "Well, they had to go away and live somewhere else. They aren't going to be coming back here." We were sad when we heard this response, but it wasn't until we were older that we discovered the real truth. The mother of that family apparently had some sort of mental break or something, because the night of the fire, she apparently murdered her husband while he was asleep. She then locked all of her sleeping kids in the house and set fire to it. She, her husband, and all 16 children perished that night. Wyatt's dad was right not to tell us at the time, as we were just too young to handle news like that. But we were still devastated later on when we heard the news. We began trying to make friends with other kids, and things went fine until we were about 10 years old. Wyatt and I developed interest in a lot of things that ended up not being considered very cool to others. We liked things like anime, Magic the Gathering, Dungeons and Dragons, and talking about places we would like to visit. I always wanted to go explore in Alaska, while Wyatt has always dreamed of going to somewhere like Florida and just living on the beach. And those kinds of things didn't get us a very positive reaction once we got to a certain age. So we became the target of teasing and bullying from a lot of the other students. The school years were already the worst as it was. I could only spend the night at Wyatt's on the weekends during the school year, which left me exposed to the abuse of Jack most of the time. During the week, I would spend my time during the day getting picked on at school, and my nights sitting in my room in fear, hoping Jack wouldn't bust in at any moment, angry at me for whatever reason he randomly came up with that night. I developed quite a bad anxiety problem because of this. I was almost always on edge, feeling like I was about to have a panic attack. It was complete torture. The only thing that helped was going to Wyatt's on the weekends. Being at his house was the only time I felt any relief and comfort. Over the years, we continued to get bullied, and we tried to keep to ourselves as much as possible. But there was a student at our school named Parker that would always seek us out any way possible. He was one of the jocks, and no matter what we did, we couldn't get rid of him. We tried so many different things, but they all had the same result. The teasing and name-calling eventually evolved into pushing and pranks that would humiliate us in front of our classmates. By the time we were 14 years old, and heading into high school, things seemed to get better. I mean, we still got bullied to an extent by the older kids, but at least Parker backed off, as he was a freshman too, and he had his own things to worry about. We were still the nerds, and that was okay with us. Eventually, we ended up in our own little nerd clique. We had a decent little group, which even included a few girls. Wyatt and I even kind of found ourselves dating girls for the first time. They were from our little group, of course, but it was still new and exciting to us. And then, Wyatt started getting sick. I can remember him going to doctor appointments a lot, and eventually, he told me. At age 14, Wyatt was diagnosed with brain cancer. It was inoperable. Chemotherapy slowed down the growth of the tumor in his head, but it also made him extremely ill and fragile. I can remember crying in my bathroom as I took a razor to my head, removing all of my hair to support Wyatt once he came back to school after getting the round of chemo that finally made him bald. He laughed when he saw me and told me I looked like an idiot. It made me laugh too, but I was still devastated. It almost seemed like Wyatt was handling the news better than I was, but I still don't know if he was just hiding his true feelings from me. Believe it or not, this entire situation somehow escalated the bullying we received at school. We were already the nerds, and now my best friend was the weird, sick kid. Half the school treated him like he was a leper, and the other half treated him like he was a freak. You would think there would be loads of compassion and people trying to help him, but that wasn't the case at all. Even Parker was back to torturing us. He would make jokes at Wyatt's expense about his sickness, calling him sick boy or cancer boy. It was horrifying that someone could act like that and have that lack of compassion. Wyatt had it bad enough on his own without the tormenting. The chemo worked pretty well for Wyatt. It slowed down the progression of the tumor, and the doctors believed it probably gave him another 3 or 4 years of living. But at age 14, that's still nowhere near enough, and I was still devastated for him. Upon his initial diagnosis, Wyatt's father began dedicating all of his time looking for something that he could do to help his son. He obsessed over it for the next few years, which is understandable. Wyatt was his only child, and he didn't want to lose him. During these years, we continued to get bullied, but we got through it. Once we were in our junior year, Parker was confident again and was back to bullying us full time. After school one day during that year, I drove Wyatt home, and that's when he told me about PQ20. It was a drug his dad had developed. Unfortunately, it wasn't a cure for cancer, but he told me it was a drug that would increase the strength of his cells, making them 3 times stronger. So, is it like steroids? I asked. No, not exactly, replied Wyatt. It won't really make me bigger or anything, but the cells I do have will become 3 times stronger. It will help my body fight off the cancer for a longer period of time if it works. It's already been 3 years and I'm starting to deteriorate fast. It's just a shot in the dark, but I'm willing to try anything if it works. Well, I said, your dad is a genius. If anyone could come up with something like this, it's him. I found myself becoming hopeful for Wyatt, and I could tell he had some faith returned to him as well. I was excited for the first time in a long time. The summer before our senior year of high school, Wyatt began taking PQ20. We sat together talking before his first dose, and he said, "If this doesn't work, I won't even make it to prom." "You're going to make it to prom, man, I promise," I replied. By the time he started taking the drug, he was very small and very weak. Of course, he wasn't even supposed to tell me about PQ20. It wasn't approved, and his father was certainly not allowed to come up with drugs and try them out on people, but he didn't have the time to get the drug approved and take it through clinical trials. By the time he did all of that, even if it did end up getting approved for human use, Wyatt would be long dead. But I was Wyatt's best friend, and he knew he could trust me. During this period of time, Wyatt's parents were getting things done so that Wyatt could begin homeschooling for his senior year. He would still be considered a student at our high school, and he could attend class or anything else related to the high school, but only if and when he felt able to. And at this point, it wasn't looking like that would be very often. Yes, I was sad for my friend, but I am also a bit selfish, and I dreaded going to school without him there. We had made other friends, even dated girls a bit, but I still didn't have it easy by any means. I would still go over and visit as much with Wyatt as I could, but at this point, he spent most of his time in bed. During the first 2 weeks he took PQ20, I spent time with him and often spent the night at his house to offer him support. I still didn't like being at home. For the most part, at this point, Jack's abuse towards my mom has gone from physical to emotional. That's not really any better, but there isn't anything I can do about it. My mom refuses to leave him even to this day. I think she's scared of what he would do if she left, but she won't admit it. Luckily, Wyatt didn't seem to experience any side effects the first couple weeks he took it, but it didn't appear to be helping either. But during his 3rd week, something amazing began to happen. He appeared to be getting some of his strength back. He began spending less and less time in bed and more time doing other things. He even started leaving the house for small periods of time. From that point on, he only continued to get better. It really looked like this drug was helping him, and if nothing else, would at least buy him some more time while his father continued to look for an actual cure. It was nothing short of amazing. By the time our senior year of high school was beginning, he had improved far enough to be able to make it to the first day of class with me. That first day of our senior year, I felt so happy being able to walk into school with Wyatt. We reunited with some of our friends that we didn't see during summer break, and things seemed great. But unfortunately, we were both quickly reminded of the parts of high school that weren't so pleasant. It seemed like as soon as Wyatt appeared to be back to normal, the bullying started back up, and things weren't any better at home either. Jack began drinking heavily again, and the abuse was intense. The only place I was able to escape it was at Wyatts House. While Wyatt and I were busy at school, we did our best to avoid Carter. Often, he was busy harassing underclassmen, but anytime we caught his attention, he wouldn't pass up the opportunity to take it out on us as well. It usually wasn't anything too extreme, mostly name-calling, taunting, shoving, knocking things out of our hands, etc. But one day, Carter took it too far. While at school, Wyatt was about to walk down the stairs. Unfortunately, I wasn't with him at the time, and I suspect Carter took advantage of this. As Wyatt was getting ready to proceed down the stairs, Carter came up behind him and shoved him, hard. Wyatt flew down the staircase violently. He never saw it coming and wasn't able to brace himself. The fall down the stairs resulted in Wyatt breaking his wrist and having one of his front teeth knocked out. A fucking cancer kid. He did this to a kid that is already suffering from brain cancer. Why? To look funny or cool or something? When I found out about this, I literally ended up crying out of anger. I felt so bad for Wyatt as it is, and then this happens on top of it. But the worst part about this is that multiple people were there to witness what happened. But every single student said either that Wyatt tripped on his own, or that they didn't see anything at all. Parker, the spoiled prep and jock wannabe, gets to do this to a boy with cancer and get away with it because he's popular. I wish more than anything I was able to kick the crap out of Parker, but I was quite a bit smaller than him. Wyatt got patched up and we returned to school. He felt even more insecure than normal due to missing a front tooth, but he had an appointment coming up soon to get a fake tooth put in. Parker backed off a bit at this point. I raised hell in the principal's office after this happened, but because I wasn't there, and all of the other students lied for Carter, he didn't get in trouble. Some of the staff was still keeping an extra eye on Carter though, and he knew it. So he played it cool. He knew how to stay out of trouble, even while he was causing it. This made the school year a little easier to get through, but there was still plenty of mild harassment that went on along the way. Finally, we began to see the light at the end of the tunnel. It was nearing the end of the school year, and thankfully, the end of high school altogether. That also, of course, meant that prom was coming up soon. This was something that was important and even symbolic to Wyatt and I. Originally, after Wyatt was diagnosed, he wasn't expecting to make it to prom. He didn't expect to live that long. And even if he did, he definitely didn't expect to be in good enough shape to be able to attend it. But here we both were, both alive and capable. I know that going to prom was something important to Wyatt, and with it only being a few weeks away, it was time to make sure he and I both found dates to the dance. For me, it was quite easy. I asked a girl named Emily to the dance. She was in our group of friends, and although we weren't officially dating or anything, the rest of our friends already seemed to expect me to ask her. Wyatt had a little more ambition when it came to who he was going to ask. Obviously, with his diagnosis, he wasn't interested in playing it safe anymore. He wanted to ask a girl named Brandy. Not only was she popular and pretty, she was the girl everyone expected Parker to go with. But Wyatt didn't seem to care. He didn't care about Parker, and he didn't care about the likely rejection. Understandably, he's not the same person he used to be. Wyatt called me after his doctor appointment he had after school, and he had found out some more news. Although he had done way better with the PQ20 than he would have done without it, the doctors discussed the recent scans they had done on him. His cancer unfortunately continued to metastasize, and ultimately, he was given 6 months to live. I was devastated once again hearing this from him, and asked him if his dad had made any further progress on finding some type of cure. But despite his dad's best efforts, nothing he tried in his experiments was working. So, I promised him that I would stick by his side until the end. and we both promised each other we would make the most of the time we had left together. Although Wyatt had only told a couple other people about what he found out from the doctor, the news still ended up spreading through the school fast. Wyatt didn't seem to mind, and as soon as he had the chance, he bravely went up to Brandy and asked her to prom. And to his surprise, she agreed to go with him. He was full of excitement when he came and found me to tell me about it. He laughed as he said he wasn't sure if she just felt bad for him or not, and that he didn't care. At this point, his happiness equaled my happiness, so I was thrilled. After school that day, I drove over to Wyatt's. We needed to get fitted for our tuxedos, but first, we decided to make a bucket list for him, including things we would be able to accomplish over the next 6 months. We were sad, but we were also excited. We were going to live our lives to the fullest while we still could. After our next day of school, I was sitting at home when I received a text message. It was a picture that Wyatt had sent me. It was just a picture of his face, and I noticed he had a black eye. I asked him what had happened, and he said, "I was getting ready to leave school and Carter approached me. He told me I needed to tell Brandy that I wasn't going to the prom with her anymore. And when I told him no, he punched me, and he told me that if I showed up to the dance, he was going to make that night living hell for me." I text Wyatt back, just telling him I was on my way over. Before I got to his house, I was trying to think of what I could do to make sure Carter didn't ruin prom for him. I just really wanted Wyatt to be able to enjoy that night. I kept thinking, and then suddenly, I had a crazy idea. So crazy that it might just be perfect. When I got to Wyatt's, I was able to get a better look at it. Carter really got him good. Man, I hated that kid. "So, what are you going to do?" I asked Wyatt. He replied, "I'm just going to go to the dance and hope for the best." "Well," I said, "what if there was something I could do to help? I know this sounds crazy, but just stick with me. You were so weak from the cancer that when you started taking the PQ20, it got you strong enough to be able to function again. But me, I'm totally healthy. I'm not a very strong guy, but if it made my cells 3 times stronger, I could protect you from Carter and make sure he didn't mess with you at the dance." Wyatt just kind of stared at me with this puzzled look on his face. "That's crazy. What if you had some type of bad reaction to it or something?" he asked. "I won't," I said. "You said you had no side effects at all. Your dad wouldn't have given you something if it had a chance of hurting you. And you told me it only works while you're taking it, so I'll take it, and once it's served its purpose, then I'll stop." We went back and forth about it for another 20 minutes or so, and eventually, with a bit of apprehension, he agreed to give it to me. I was nervous when I first began taking the PQ20. I know it didn't affect Wyatt badly, but I still knew there was a risk. It was just a risk I was willing to take. Over the next couple of days, I didn't notice anything, good or bad. But on the 5th day, I woke up and began to notice some changes. My movements seemed easier than normal. Everything seemed effortless. The PQ20 seemed to take an effect on me quicker than it did Wyatt. It seemed to peak after about a week of taking it. I went to the gym to test my strength, and I was amazed at how well this stuff was working. At school, I was no longer scared. I found myself with this sense of confidence I had never felt before. When Wyatt and I were approached by Carter, I did something I've never done before. I didn't try to back away from him. The usual insults started coming our way, but this time, I stood up for Wyatt and I. This caught Carter off guard, and also seemed to upset him. Once Wyatt finally spoke up, that seemed to be the last straw for Carter. He began walking towards Wyatt in an aggressive way. I wasn't going to just stand there and watch him put his hands on Wyatt again, and stepped in between the two. Once Carter got too close, I pushed him back away from us as hard as I could, which turned out to be way harder than I expected. Carter violently flew backwards into the locker and then fell down to the ground. He stood up, but appeared to have the wind knocked out of him. Slightly bent over, he managed to say, "You guys are dead," as he walked off. Wyatt began laughing and said, "That was awesome." I just stood there, a bit shocked at how things had just played out, and we walked off. We managed to avoid Carter the next couple of days, and finally the weekend of the prom was here. Wyatt and I were both very excited. I believe I was more excited for him than I was for myself. We spent all day together that Saturday, preparing for the dance. Eventually the time came, and we picked up our dates. The four of us enjoyed dinner together, and eventually made our way to the dance. I was very happy to see Wyatt and Brandy enjoying their time together, and it didn't appear that Brandy said yes to Wyatt just out of pity. She at least wasn't acting like it was that way. Despite feeling like I could handle the Carter problem, I was still a bit nervous for how things would play out at the dance with him. But luckily for us, when we got there, we didn't see him. The dance went on and things were amazing. The four of us were having an incredible time together. It wasn't until the dance was getting close to drawing to a close when I first saw him that night. It was Carter. He was at the dance, and he was watching us. I've seen him angry before, but the way he was watching us appeared to be with some type of hate I'd yet to witness. I became a bit afraid for the safety of the individuals I was with that night. Finally, I saw Carter begin to approach us. He seemed to be trying to get close to Wyatt, but I intervened. I asked for Carter to come outside to talk to me. I didn't want Wyatt's night to get ruined, and I was going to stop Carter no matter what I had to do. Carter said no and started acting more and more belligerent. That's when I decided I was going to bring him outside myself. He was a strong guy, but it didn't feel like it at the time. I had to use some effort, but overall, I was able to move him quite easily. It wasn't until I dragged him outside of the side door of the building that I noticed 5 of Carter's friends had followed us. I was very strong after taking the PQ-20, but I was far outnumbered. They wasted no time attacking me, and I began fighting as hard as I could. As long as no more than 2 of them had their hands on me at once, I could maintain the upper hand. I threw them to the ground to keep them off me while trying to throw punches or kicks whenever I safely could. But eventually, there was only so much I could do. And once I was tripped to the ground, I was starting to get beat up pretty bad. I tried struggling to my feet, and suddenly saw one of my attackers randomly drop to the ground. It was at that point that I saw Wyatt. He had come outside to find me, and was trying to help me fight. It looked like he was keeping one of the assailants busy, but I was still outnumbered 5-1. I continued fighting the best I could until I started hearing screaming, and finally my attackers all seemed to stop. I was a bit confused and a bit delirious from getting hit so many times, but I began looking around, trying to figure out what was going on. That's when I saw Wyatt. He was in the process of standing up. It was at that point that I saw what he had in his hand. A softball-sized rock. I walked over to him, and to my horror, I then saw the condition of the guy he was fighting. He laid there on the ground, unrecognizable. Part of his head was literally bashed in, and he was clearly dead. I didn't know what to do, or even what to think. In a panic, I told Wyatt, "Dude, let's go!" We ran to my car, and I started driving us away. Wyatt began freaking out. "I'm sorry, man. I saw them all attacking you. I was just trying to help, and I lost control." It's okay, Wyatt. I know you didn't really mean to hurt anyone. We're going to get this figured out." All I could think about was Wyatt spending the rest of his short life alone in a jail cell. I knew he was telling the truth. He wouldn't intentionally hurt a fly. I knew he had just lost control of himself. I drove a few towns over and got us a motel room with cash. I just wanted to buy us some time until we figured out what to do next. We sat up all night trying to figure out a plan. By this point, both of our phones were ringing as we were obviously being looked for. It didn't take long before those calls and messages started coming in. People trying to ask what happened and telling me the police were searching for Wyatt. We went on and on, talking about our options, and finally, Wyatt told me he was just going to turn himself in. He said he didn't want me to get wrapped up in this. I told him no, but he was adamant. Eventually, he called the police and told them he was going to turn himself in. We spent as much time with each other as we could, knowing it would probably be the last time. It was 11 a.m. by the time we left the motel. I told Wyatt I would drive us back and to get some rest. Once Wyatt fell asleep, he really seemed to crash. It took him over 10 hours to wake up again. When he did wake up, he asked me, "What's going on?" I replied, "Well, after you fell asleep, I was looking over at you, and I decided I couldn't let my best friend die alone in jail. So I made a pit stop over to my house. And while I personally didn't kill anyone, I did do enough to Jack to probably put myself in jail for a while. Let's just say he's never going to be laying a finger on my mom again. But even if we were together, I then decided you were still too good of a person to die in jail. So after we left my house, I just started driving south and haven't stopped except to get gas. In fact, we just crossed over the border into Mexico 10 minutes ago. It isn't Florida or California, but you'll finally be able to live on the beach. So tell me, what item on your bucket list do you want to check off first?"